This stuff is great! All we have on Orion are, like, sharp little pebbles. Hey, I can get us out of this force field if you need me to.
No, I know, but I have to get intel for the captain. And I think I know how this escape is gonna play out.
Well, works for me.
Hey Star Trek fans, Dan Gunther here with another review of a Star Trek Lower Decks episode. In this episode, I'm taking a look at Season 4, Episode 7, A Few Badgeys More. So right off the bat, we pick up in the Kala system after the events of Season 3, and we finally get to see what exactly happened and who stole Rutherford's old implant. The implant, of course, which contained Badgey's program. Now, we saw this implant being scavenged at the end of Season 3, and here we finally get to see that it is the Drukmani who have scavenged it. In very short order, Badgey takes over the Drukmani ship and turns them towards his own purposes, which are, of course, evil. We also get to see the continuation of the attacks on various vessels in this episode. We see the Binars being attacked. We hear them speak in their own language. It is not subtitled. We don't get any kind of translation, but it is definitely that kind of modem sound that they made in the original episode they were introduced in way back in TNG Season 1, the episode 11001001. And their ship, like the others, is seemingly destroyed. The Cerritos gets assigned to look into this attack, while at the same time Boimler is assigned to visit Agamis, the megalomaniacal computer played by Jeffrey Combs, who is incarcerated at the Daystrom Institute in a previous episode, and Tendi is assigned to attend Peanut Hamper's parole hearing. Peanut Hamper, of course, being the exocomp we met at the end of Lower Decks Season 1, and who was the centerpiece of the episode A Mathematically Perfect Redemption, in which she was very much not redeemed. However, here it seems that Tendi is very optimistic that she has in fact been redeemed, has served her sentence, and therefore has been rehabilitated. However, as we see early on in the episode, Peanut Hamper seems to be conspiring with Agamis to escape and go back to their dominating ways. However, like I said, Tendi is very optimistic and believes that Peanut Hamper has indeed been reformed. Now, this episode is very interesting with regards to a rewatch, because when you watch it the first time, you kind of get the impression that Tendi is naive in her belief in Peanut Hamper's innate goodness and ability to be reformed because of that conversation earlier on. But when you watch this a second time and you realize that Tendi is in fact correct and Peanut Hamper actually has been rehabilitated, it really puts a different spin on the episode and makes it much more enjoyable. So, spoiler alert as to my thoughts on the episode. The first time I watched it, I actually was not very impressed throughout most of it, and didn't really think it stacked up against the previous episodes in the season. After having watched it a second time, especially with regards to this part with Peanut Hamper, who I was very much not impressed with in the previous seasons of Mathematically Perfect Redemption, I think here, knowing that she actually has been reformed, or at least seemingly, they could still turn it around in a future episode, but for the most part here it seems that she has been reformed, and knowing that throughout watching the episode, it gives a much different spin on it and allows you to realize that Tendi really does know what she's talking about and isn't as naive as we might have thought she was on the first watch through. So the part of the episode with Boimler and Agamis was actually one of my favorite parts of this. Jeffrey Combs, of course, is brilliant as the voice of Agamis, and him dealing with the heartbreak of Peanut Hamper not meeting him when she was supposed to, and his expectations being thwarted in that regard, I thought was a lot of fun. He plays that so very well. I love that Boimler takes Agamis along and is seemingly caught off guard by him, but as we learn at one point, he and Tendi could have escaped at any time. They're just kind of playing along to get the information that Agamis supposedly has. There was one part where it seems odd. They just kind of sweep it under the rug with one line by Boimler, and that is the takeover of the planet Plumeria by Agamis, wherein Boimler kind of offhandedly says, "Oh yeah, this totally isn't something that Starfleet could fix in an hour," implying that of course Starfleet's going to come along and fix the situation. But Agamis does make mention of the coastal cities falling. I wonder how many of these lizard people died when this planet was taken over. Hopefully none. because that seems like something very odd to just kind of hand wave away and say, oh yeah, it's fine. Just let him take over a planet. We need the information. But I'm going to give Boimler the benefit of the doubt and say that like this planet folded very quickly. As Brandy pointed out in our live show, the race that is inhabiting this planet seems to be those lizard people from, I think, the season 1 finale of Lower Decks that kind of seem to be pushovers. So maybe not many of them were harmed in this takeover and they just kind of folded. Hopefully that's the case. And indeed, this can be undone really quickly by Starfleet. We, of course, do find out that Peanut Hamper has apparently been reformed. She's working with her father on the Tyrus 7A outpost, where the exocomps were first created, and she seems to be doing okay with not being a criminal. Which has the added benefit of affecting Agamus and causing him to be on the path to reformation, and maybe even might convince Tyrannochillicus and other sentient megalomaniacal artificial life forms that a life of crime and domination is not the way to go. So kind of a nice ending here, very Star Trek, very, the 24th century works, and a nice juxtaposition to kind of the failures of our criminal justice system, or the criminal justice system that a lot of the viewers will be familiar with. So the other side of the story that has to do with the actual title of the episode, we have the return of Badgey. The Cerritos, like I said, is assigned to investigate the Bynar attack. That's where they encounter the Drukmani ship that has been taken over by Badgey. Rutherford decides to sacrifice himself to save the ship. He feels responsible for creating Badgey and unleashing this horror upon his crewmates. And Mariner decides to go with him, not realizing that he was just intending to sacrifice himself. And Mariner's kind of like, maybe I could have stayed behind on this one. But they do try several approaches to get to Badgey, one of which is showing Badgey compassion, and Rutherford gives him a hug and embraces him as his son, which causes him to split off a personality that is called Goodgie. I do have to say I like the pun, Badgey, Goodgie. That's pretty good. I like that. It made me chuckle. So now, bad news, we have Badgey stripped of all of his goodness, at which point Rutherford tries to appeal to his logical side, and from there he splits off another badge called Logicy. So now we have Badgey stripped of all goodness, stripped of all logic, and basically unfettered at this point. And then that part of the story ends in a literal deus ex machina, where Badgey has evolved to the point he spreads himself across computer systems, across the entire Federation. He can destroy everything in the Federation with a thought, basically. Evolved so far that he doesn't realize the point of it and ascends to a higher plane of existence. Kind of like the officer from season 1, Tendy's friend, who did much the same thing. So, interesting tack to take there. I feel like we've dealt with Badgey, I guess. It seems pretty pat. I liked it. I thought it was a nice little commentary on, what do you do when you have ultimate power? Well, you kind of get bored, and you seem above that sort of thing, just destroying all life. So, yeah, an interesting tack to take with something that Star Trek's done a lot, which is AI run amok and wanting to destroy life. So again, like I said, I wasn't extremely impressed with the episode the first time through. However, on a rewatch, I actually really enjoy this episode. I think it stacks up really well. To this point in the season, I still would rank it as my least favorite episode, but as I've said in other places on other podcasts and videos, that's more of a comment on the rest of this season, which has been incredibly good. So it's set a very, very high bar. This episode comes very close. It's not a bad episode at all. I really enjoyed it. It's one that I've rewatched and, like I said, enjoyed even more on rewatches. I just didn't quite enjoy it as much as the rest of the season, but that's a matter of fractions of a degree. So Easter eggs in this episode, there aren't a ton. This is an episode that relies more, I'd say, on referring back to the lore of Lower Decks rather than the lore of the rest of Star Trek. However, there are a few. We get the mention of Boimler and Mariner's love of grapplers. This is a little bit of a reference back to some dialogue from the crossover episode between Lower Decks and Strange New Worlds, where they talk about grapplers in glowing terms, as does La'an Noonien Singh. She apparently really loves grapplers as well.
Plus it had, the grapplers.
Skip that part. They don't care. I love grapplers.
See?
All right.
As I mentioned earlier, we see the Tyrus 7A particle fountain. This was originally seen in the TNG episode The Quality of Life. That's the episode where the exocomps were first introduced. They were invented at Tyrus 7A particle fountain by Dr. Farallon. They pretty faithfully recreated the sets and look of the particle fountain, including the Tucker tubes. We see a subspace relay station. This was first seen in the TNG episode Aquiel. We see the USS Vancouver, which was first introduced in season 1 of Lower Decks. We see this Vulcan ship and Captain Sokol. This was the ship that T'Lyn was assigned to, and Sokol was her captain in the episode Way Douge. Interestingly enough, we've not seen T'Lyn in the last few episodes, and spoiler alert, we won't see her in the next episode either. So I'm feeling a little bit of a T'Lyn-sized hole in my heart lately. I need to see that Vulcan again. Bring her back soon, please. As Badgey is spreading himself across the galaxy, we also see Deep Space Nine, and of course, when he ascends, we see the smiling koala. What does he know? Well, those were my thoughts on the episode A Few Badgeys More. What did you think of this episode? Please let me know in the comments below. Also, like I said, kind of thin on the Easter eggs a little bit this week, which makes me think I probably missed some. Please let me know in the comments what I missed. Thanks, of course, to the Patreon supporters for their help in bringing these videos to you. You are the best. I could not do it without you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. To everyone else, of course, as always, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Next up is my review of the episode Caves. Only 3 episodes left in the season to talk about, which is crazy. These 10-episode seasons go by way too fast. But I hope you'll join me for that one. Until then, as always, live long and prosper.